Okay, so in this video we're going to look at how to do maths in VB6. So we'll look at maths in its simplest format, and we'll look at some little problems can arise from using maths in VB6, and then if you've got time we'll look at some advanced tips and techniques that some people might be interested in. But first of all, maths in its simplest form. Here I've got a Visual Basic project with a 4-minute, and then I've got some text labels here displaying the sums that I want to try and calculate the answer to. I've got some command buttons next to each one, and when I click on a command button, it's got the code behind it that will do the maths to work out each sum, and then the answers will be displayed in this label here, which is called LBL answer. So let's have a look at the first one. We've got 3 plus 2, so if I look at the code behind that, we'll see that it couldn't be simpler. LBL answer.caption equals 3 plus 2. And then the next one is a minus. 2 minus 3. And again, couldn't be simpler. When we do multiplication, although we're used to using the x to signify a times, to signify a multiplication, in VB6 we need to use a star instead, which is Shift and 8 on your keyboard. And there are 2 types of division that can be done in VB6. Let's just run this, check that we get the right answers. 3 plus 2, 5, 2 minus 3 equals minus 1, so it handles minus numbers well. 3 times 2 is 6, and then we've got 3 divided by 2 equals 1.5, so it'll handle decimals as well, decimal places. That is the forward/ division. The backslash division is known as a VB integer division, and it will give the same answer but without the decimal places, without the fractions. So it'll only give you the whole number. So 3 divided by 2, there are only 1 lots of 2 in 3. So that's the answer that it's given us. So there's a difference in the forward slash and the backslash. Forward slash and the backslash divisions in VB6. So you need to be aware of those 2 differences. Now, we can look at a slightly more advanced calculator here, one that will accept entries from users, and then the user gets to select an operator. The user clicks on equals, and then the answer appears over on the right hand side in a text label. So if I was going to do 2 minus 2, click on the minus button, puts the minus there for me, hit equals, and I get my 0. Hit times, I get my 4. Hit division, I should get a 1, and I do. So let's look at some of the code behind that. These buttons set the type of operator that is wanted to be used. So the first one says if it's a plus, if the plus button is clicked on, then LBL operator.caption equals plus. So that's LBL operator, so its caption becomes plus. And then when we hit the equals, we have some logic here that works out what type of operator needs to be used based on what the caption is for LBL operator, and then does the maths each time. So if it's a minus that's displayed in LBL operator, do a minus. So this will work fine for a minus, for a times, for a division, but notice what happens if we try the plus. Now we know that 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 22, so something has gone wrong with the maths. And if LBL operator.caption equals plus, then LBL answer.caption equals the value in text box 1 plus the value in text box 2. Seems reasonable enough. But on further reading, if you look this up on the internet, what VB6 will try and do, if it's got a plus symbol as part of its maths, it may try to concatenate the two values, join the two values together as if they were text and not numbers. So the equivalent of what that would do, the ampersand, which is not what we want. So this is where the use of variables really proves its worth. If we look at this example, what we've got are two variables here. The variables are set to the values from the text boxes, and then the variables are used in the maths, and you don't then get the same problem, you get the correct answer. And that's because when the plus is used and VB6 knows that a variable is of a number data type and double is a number data type, then it will use the plus correctly. Okay, double is used instead of integer or byte because double will allow for decimals as well, will allow for fractions, whereas integer and byte won't. So that's a little problem that people need to be aware of. Just be wary, if you're using the plus, try to use variables that are set to a data type that is a number. Now, some of the coding that's in this version of my calculator is a little bit inefficient. Okay, if you think you've got time, keep watching, and we'll look at how we could make it a bit more efficient and a couple of other little handy tips as well. If you're not too worried about that sort of thing, you don't need to keep watching. So in this example, works pretty much the same. Okay, but instead of having 4 buttons that use different code to set LBL operator, we have what is called a control array, where all these buttons have the same name. They're all called CMD operator. So if we click on the -1, it's called CMD operator. Click on the ×1, CMD operator. And you'll notice that each time I click on one, the number just after the control's name changes. So it's like an array, but this is called a control array. And the beauty of it is there's only one set of code for each control array. So if I double click on the division sign, it's the same code that I would get if I double clicked on the minus sign or the plus sign. It's exactly this. It takes me to exactly the same place. And because each button, because each element in the control array has an index, we can use that index, and we're going to say that LBL operator's caption should equal the caption of the button that is clicked. And putting index there, we'll use the button that is clicked. So that's a really nice feature of VB6. And cuts down on the amount of code massively. Our equals button, before we did if statements, and we had 4 separate if statements. An improvement on that would be a few less lines of code, which is where you use else ifs instead. So you don't use any end ifs apart from at the very end, and use something called else ifs. That's just a same way of doing it, slightly nicer, slightly more fluent. But even more eloquent to do the same sort of thing is where you use something called a select case. So if you just have a quick look at that, it's the same result that is achieved, but is a nice smooth way of writing your code if you've got lots of logic that you want to step through, lots of if then else logic that you want to get through. Incidentally, when it gets to do the division, okay, and there's lots of validation you could build into this program, but when it gets to do the division, it checks to see if the second number is blank or is 0, because you'll get an error if you try to divide by 0. So it's handling it here. If txt .text equals blank, or if txt2.text equals 0, then we've just got this logic slightly wrong way around, haven't we? Or very the wrong way around. So if it's blank or 0, generate an error message saying you cannot divide by 0, otherwise do the calculation. So it's just handling a division by 0 error there, because you can't divide a number by 0. It's impossible. Other things that's in this application that you might like to know, I've got a default button. So when I run I'm hitting 2 plus 2, and then I'm pressing enter on the keyboard. Because this button is what is known as a default button, it has focus, so you can use the enter key to activate it. That's just a nice little thing, and I'll show you how to do that. You may notice the form's title has changed, and I'll show you how you can set that quite nicely as well. The default button, you click on the button in design mode and you set default to true there, and that becomes the default button for when the application is run. The form's caption at the top is set on the form load event, which we've looked at before, and you say me.caption, me being the form, equals, and then whatever you want to put. So I've said amazing calculator, then I've put a V, and then I've appended, concatenated the version of the application, which is a nice thing to do, because this is the very first version of this application. I've said the major, minor, and revision numbers for each of those, app.major, and then I've concatenated a full stop, and then I've concatenated app.minor, etc. So I get that appearing at the top of my form.